Visit Avery.com, Avary, for the most up-to-date news and information on Team Avery.
Avery, 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 Avery,
This is The Gala Show. I'm your reporter on the beat, Gala Avery. On season 2 of The Gala Show, I'm inviting back prior guests who told me that my 30-minute time limit was just not enough for them. For the month of October, he's a writer, producer, director, and composer. Last time he was on the show, he sat down and chatted with me about Dawn of the Dead. This time, he's got a totally new topic and we're ready to bite into it. Returning to the mic is the black-gloved killer himself, Chris Alexander. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Gala Avery. Thank you for having me on again. I didn't, the first time I was on, it was a thrill of my life. I never in my wildest dreams thought I'd come back for round 2. So thanks for having me here.
I'm so excited that you're here and returning on my show.
Yes.
So before we bring up the topic for today, I have a question for you. As the lover of the macabre that you are, did your view on the genre change when you became a father? Like, did you soften to certain things?
Absolutely. But I mean, that's the if you're a lifelong fan of strange cinema, genre, horror films, what scares you, it changes as you age, of course. What scares you at a certain point in your youth, whether it be something lurking under the bed or beyond the door, it changes as those mysteries are demystified. And so, yes, when I became a father, and anyone who is a parent and actually takes to it will say that kind of life begins, or a new version of your life begins then. Maybe it's primordial. I don't know what it is. But absolutely, I mean, I could never... to experience and even endure something like Pet Sematary is traumatic to me.
You know what? My mom actually walked out of that. My dad took my mom on a date to that movie.
Right.
And that's like the one movie she's ever walked out of. Besides, we went to go see the new Jurassic Park together.
Well, you just walked out because it's terrible.
Well, yeah, she and I walked out 10 minutes in.
Okay, well,
and
there you go.
We actually ran out, like from the theater. We ran.
Right. Well, no children die in that film. But I remember watching, for example, Lars von Trier's Antichrist.
Yeah.
Which is one of my favorite films, but I've only seen it once. And I don't ever need to jump back into that world anytime soon. And I almost walked out of that film many times, including in the opening sequence of that film. I don't know if you've seen it, but it begins with body doubles playing Willem Dafoe and Charlotte Gainsbourg, making very explicit love in the shower in very arty slow motion, while they're ignoring their toddler who wanders to the precipice of their high-rise window and falls out and falls to his death while they're making love. And that sets the tone for what's to come. I mean, to watch that sequence, I almost had to leave. I couldn't handle it. It was almost pornographic. Well, it literally was pornographic, but so explicit to detail the slow-mo death of a child. No, I couldn't handle that. So absolutely, I have, that's my, I'm not saying it's a deal breaker if the movie surrounding that incident is good and there's something investing me in it, I'll stick with it. But it's absolutely a trigger for me, absolutely.
It's interesting because I watched Quentin now because he has 2 children now.
Right.
And now that we watch movies when they have children or fathers and sons, he gets very invested and very choked up. And it's clear why, because all of a sudden when you now have this child and it's the most precious thing that you have, it's
an amazing journey for a lover of cinema and stories to, as your life changes, to suddenly, even the things that you may have viewed as corny when you were a kid, almost cliche, the father and son trope, suddenly becomes, it hits you in a very, again, primordial way. It becomes almost sacred.
Now, as always, my guest gets to bring their topic to the mic. Chris, what's your topic this time around, and why did you choose it?
Well, dovetailing from what we just spoke about fathers and sons, I mean, this is, I'm going to talk about, and it seems maybe to the average listener who thinks that, my stock in trade being horror films, I mean, why is he talking about 1978's Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park? I was on the fence. I thought, am I going to talk about Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park? Or am I going to talk about another favorite film of mine, 1971's The Omega Man, which is one of my favorite films.
I love Omega Man.
Me too, for many reasons, but it is a terrible adaptation of my favorite novella, I Am Legend. It truly is a terrible adaptation.
Do you think that, before we get into it, do you think I Am Legend is a better adaptation of I Am Legend?
No, God, no. What? The movie with Will Smith? Oh my God, no. No, I mean, listen, the best, hasn't been there hasn't been a de facto adaptation of probably what I think to be the easiest book to adapt, full stop. Yet, I mean, 1964's The Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price, directed by Sidney Salco, is close. But
no
Matheson took it,
cigar.
not quite. Matheson took his name off it, and put his pen name in there, Logan Swanson. I digress. So I was gonna which one am I gonna talk about? And then it hit me that I can kind of talk about both in a way if we get to that, because Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, the villain is played by the great Anthony Zerbe, and in the Omega Man, Matthias the Heavy is also played by Anthony Zerbe. In fact, his role in Kiss Meets the Phantom is sort of an expansion. I think in many ways he's flexing his role in the Omega Man. So they are connected in a very strange way by Zerbe's presence in them. But absolutely, let's start with 1978's woeful, wonderfully woeful Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park. But before we get into the topic, it's time for a commercial break.
Back by popular demand, the Video Archives merch store is up and running. Get your favorite t-shirts, hats, notebooks, stickers, and more at videoarchivesmerch.com. You know me. I write all my notes in the Notes on Cinema notebook, the Gall edition, of course. Check out videoarchivesmerch.com to get yours today. Hey, thanks so much for being a loyal listener. If you want to keep up with me off mic, make sure to follow me on Instagram at Gala Avery.
And we're back.
You heard it here. We are talking about Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park.
Right.
I got that right.
Yeah.
30 minutes on the clock, and our time starts now. I haven't seen it.
Okay, well, you should. Or should.
Why?
I shouldn't recommend this. I recommend with reservations.
Okay, that's interesting that you're going to talk about a movie that you might not recommend.
Okay, listen, when I was... let's back this up. So when I was about 3 years old, I was in the Eatonville Library in Toronto, Ontario, where I live and where I was raised. And I was leafing through the children's records, and Raffi, Sharon, Lois and Bram, all the usual suspects, Sesame Street. And I come across this, I didn't know what I was looking at. There was this garish image of four strange clown-like creatures dressed in chain metal and leather, and a horde of ghostly vampire women swooning at their feet while fog was blowing out behind them in some sort of dungeon scenario. And I could read a little bit at that point, and I could see that the most prominent graphic on there read Kiss. And I was like, what the... Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, you're not allowed to
What
swear.
the fuck am I looking at? I could not even... I couldn't articulate. I couldn't quantify.
How
what I
old
was.
were you?
I was about 3 or 4.
Wow.
Yeah. So my dad was with me, and I said, Dad, what's this? My dad, God bless him, God rest him, would always take me to the library and let me take out records, rock and roll, cool books, whatever. It was a big
At
deal.
3 years
Oh,
old.
it was a big deal for me. I was a huge library junkie. And I was like, what is this? What is this? Can we take it out? He's like, no, Kiss sucks. So immediately I had a kind of several awakenings. One, I was introduced to this band that looked like monsters, and I wasn't even really aware what monsters were. Gene Simmons, the demon in Kiss, was illustrated by the great artist Ken Kelly, who painted the cover. Wow. Ken Kelly, do you know Ken Kelly?
No.
He was one of the most respected comic book
Is
artists.
it kind of
of the
like
period.
Frazetta-esque?
He was. Well, they all came from the same
They all came
camp.
from the
They
same
worked
camp,
for
yep.
Warren Publishing. So
creepy, eerie.
creepy. He did a lot of creepy.
Vampirella.
Vampirella. You got it.
Then I probably know his covers for sure.
Absolutely. So imagine a Vampirella cover, but painted as a rock album with Kiss, and it's the cover of Love Gun, the album Love Gun. And Gene Simmons had bat wings and fangs, and I, again, did not know what I was looking at. My dad said, Kiss sucks, we can't take this record out, so it was left to my imagination what existed on that wax
I
platter.
like how your dad is like, nah, this
Well, he was,
sucks.
he introduced me to all kinds of cool rock and roll.
What
but
did he
was a
think was
snob.
great? What did he think was great?
Well, Kiss was frowned upon, especially at this time, and I'll tell you why. Okay, so first and foremost, I wasn't allowed to take it out, so I had nightmares about Kiss almost every night.
Really?
I lived in a condominium, and the ceiling vents, I always dreamt that Gene Simmons, I didn't know even Gene Simmons, whatever that thing was coming down like a ghost, and my mom would come in, I'd be crying, she's like, it's okay, Kiss is a band, they're not, don't be afraid of Kiss. So that was my first monster, and that kind of opened all the doors into the
Kiss
cosmic.
was your first monster.
Yeah, before Dracula, Gene was my vampire.
Wow.
Right. So eventually I did take the record out, and I was a little let down by it. It was just shitty rock and roll, but
Your dad was right, maybe.
Well, not really. And so Kiss became my favorite band. But Kiss Meets the Phantom, and I recommend it with reservations because it stands alone, and I can't think of another another motion picture that is quite like it. Whether you love it or don't, it doesn't matter. It exists alone. It floats in its own void. It's a singular cinematic
I have a few
experience.
like Night Riders for me. I don't know how to quantify.
Oh, George Romero's Night
Yeah, but I don't know how to quantify
That may
Night
be
Riders.
his best movie.
I love Night Riders,
Yeah.
but how do you like
Well,
rate
that's the
that
beauty of
against
it.
anything else?
No, you can't. It is probably George's most personal movie.
Yeah.
But Night Riders is Gone with the Wind. Night Riders
I
is
know.
Battleship Potemkin compared to Kiss Meets the Phantom. So at this period, let's talk a little bit about Kiss. Do you probably don't know anything or
You know,
care
it's
about
funny.
Kiss.
Okay, so I go rowing. I really love rowing. My favorite rowing instructor, who actually just retired today,
Right.
she loves Kiss.
Right.
And so every now and then they'll play a Kiss song, like in rowing, but like it's hard to row to.
Yeah, well,
So
I mean,
I don't really know much. I just know they wear like the black and white face paint.
Well,
and
they
go,
did, yeah. They're over. They're finished now, sadly. But listen, so we're talking about the early 1970s. Alice Cooper, glam rock, shock rock was growing. Cooper was a big deal. And these four guys from Queens, New York got together and they said, okay, New York Dolls, if one Alice Cooper's cool, let's try four Alice Coopers. And they developed their own specific personas and they played this thrashy, nasty, fat, ugly rock and roll. Dirty, grimy, and they'd play the clubs in New York and people would come out and through word of mouth, they'd start to sell at bigger clubs and they'd go on tour.
They're
And
also huge guys, right? Like really.
well, they weren't huge. They just wore gigantico platform monstrous
It's funny because
shoes.
like, whenever I see them, I think they're huge. I'm not sure
Well,
if it's like
they're large. Well, they're
but
larger than life.
That's like the Tom Cruise effect. Like I always think I love Tom.
Yes, but it's a bit different because Tom Cruise doesn't wear like pounds of clown makeup and like gigantic monstrous
Rock of the
costumes
Ages, Rock
and
of the Ages.
Godzilla boots and like they're on another level. So this guy Bill Aucoin partnered up with them, was their manager, and massaged them into this super group. 3 records in, Casablanca Records. There's an okay movie called Spinning Gold on Netflix right now if you want to check it out. That kind of tells the story of how Kiss grew out of Casablanca. Their records would sell. Seemed like the game was over. They released an album called Alive that captured the essence of their live performance, and everything changed. The band blew up. And very quickly, Kiss became a supergroup, one of the very first supergroups like that was mass merchandised into, dolls, Mego dolls, which I actually have a full set of those, pinball machines, comic books printed by Marvel Comics where the red ink was actually Kiss's blood.
Really?
That they threw into the vat.
No way.
Yeah, so Kiss became more than just a
That's
band.
like what like Lil Nas X tried to do,
Well,
right? With the
before
shoes.
Lil Nas
No,
X,
but
there was
obviously
Kiss.
though, I'm saying like it's so derivative of Kiss then,
Absolutely.
like in their marketing.
Kiss got there first, and it was a big deal. Stan Lee was at the plant with them and throwing the
Really?
blood.
No way.
And there's videos that you can find these videos if
And
you
it's
look.
their blood.
Yeah. No, there's a bit of a rumor out there that I think it's Sports Illustrated number 113 that something happened in the plant and that their blood was actually, because that was printed at the same time as the Kiss comic book, that their blood actually ended up in Sports Illustrated and that the Kiss comic doesn't actually have any DNA in it. But who can tell? I don't know. It's
Oh
all
my
part
God.
of the myths
Sports.
surrounding
I
Kiss.
wonder what's in Sports Illustrated number 113.
I don't
what's
know.
in those pages?
I don't know. But so here we are in the middle of the 1970s. Things are crazy. Star Wars opens up in 1977, as you
Yeah,
know.
the Sorcerer. Yeah.
Well, Star Wars being the one that changed everything because
Yeah.
PG movie kids were starting to love Kiss because they had their own comic book. And Lunchbox kids said they kissed Lunchbox, so they weren't just a band; they became this brand. And Bill Aucoin, their manager, came up with this great idea to blend Star Wars and A Hard Day's Night and make the Kiss movie where Kiss are in it playing Kiss, but a version of Kiss that are these ethereal, supernatural, interplanetary superheroes fighting villains.
And they come to Earth.
Well, initially it was pitched to the band.
Like Earth
as
Girls Are
Star
Easy?
Wars meets Hard Day's Night. Yeah, well, that's what, it was pitched to be this like very sophisticated science fiction epic. But somewhere along the way, the money guys came in, and in the form of Hanna-Barbera.
Oh,
Right? Okay, you know Hanna-Barbera?
Yep.
Right? The house
cartoons,
The house that, built
Yeah.
Scooby-Doo and the
Yeah.
Flintstones.
It's
and
the cartoons that like we all grew up on.
Exactly. So suddenly this movie that was supposed to be this gigantic rock and roll science fiction rock opera
The epic.
became this television film produced by Hanna-Barbera.
Is it animated? No.
Not at all, but it probably should have been.
Interesting.
Yeah. So when you're a kid and you're discovering this band for the first time and you come of age with, sex, rock and roll, comic books, superheroes, monsters, this was a big deal to a lot of my generation. We had to see Kiss Meets the Phantom of the
Yeah.
Park. But I don't even know how to articulate what a terrible, beautifully terrible movie. Everything that could go wrong in this movie did. The band,
During
they could,
the production of it?
well, I mean, they could. It was directed by a guy named Gordon Hessler, who was picked for the role, picked for the to be the director by Gene Simmons himself, because Gene was a monster guy, and Gordon Hessler had directed, several, pretty quality British films, but had also directed a series of horror films for AIP, The Oblong Box, few more, and Gene was like, "This is our guy." Gordon Hessler was not the guy to direct a rock and roll horror musical at all, so he was the wrong choice. The band couldn't act, so to see these four idiots up in this movie in these stupid costumes running around Magic Mountain, it takes place in a theme park.
No, it's...
Oh yeah, it's Magic Mountain.
But which Magic Mountain?
Here in California.
Oh my God, like the one
Yeah.
in like Saugus or
Yeah,
whatever? Like
It's,
in
it's a
Santa
legendary
Clarita?
part of Magic Mountain history.
Oh my-
That Kiss
I
Meets
did
the
not
Phantom takes
know
place in
that.
this park.
Oh my, I had a seizure in that park.
Oh well.
My only seizure I've ever had, I had at Magic Mountain.
Well, I'm sure many people had seizures also after watching this atrocity that is Kiss Meets
Oh
the
my
Phantom.
gosh.
So here we have this crazy movie. Anthony Zerbe, who was, again, a respected actor, who was in The Omega Man, among many other films, was chosen to be the villain who creates these animatronic monsters in the park because he's jealous that all the kids like the rock and roll band Kiss and they don't care about his cool little amusements that he's building. And he basically sicks an army of robots and Kiss doubles to fight Kiss at a Kiss concert in the middle of Magic Mountain. And, Gene Simmons belches fire out to burn them, and he speaks through an echo chamber like Zandor Vorkov from Dracula versus Frankenstein. Paul Stanley shoots laser beams out of his eyes. Ace has got electricity coming out of his guitars. I forget what Peter Criss does, the drum. Who knows? Doesn't matter. Ace Frehley was a chronic drunk, so he wouldn't show up on set half the time, and he had a stunt double who was black, who ended up playing him. So every time they cut to Ace Frehley, it's clearly not Ace Frehley.
It's this black dude.
It's this black dude who ended up doubling for Wesley Snipes and Eddie Murphy years later.
Oh my Lord.
So it's insane. The music is by Hoyt Curtin, who did...
Wait, the music isn't even by Kiss?
Well, no, there's Kiss songs in it. But the music is, the incidental music, the orchestral score, is done by a guy named Hoyt Curtin, who was the house composer for Hanna-Barbera. So it's fucking Scooby-Doo music and Flintstone music, and even the sound effects are from the Hanna-Barbera
Doing, doing,
archive.
doing.
Cha-cha-chang, like that guitar sound. So it's like, it was pretty... Okay, here's the thing. It was Kiss at their peak. No other band had done what they had done.
What
There
year
was
is
not
this again?
1978. It was the epitome of everything decadent about the 1970s, but it also completely decimated the band. They splintered off after that. They created solo albums.
It broke up the band.
Ace Frehley was a drunk. Peter was a drunk. They got these crazy egos.
Oh my gosh.
And then by 1979, members were quitting. By 1980, they lost their drummer. By 1981, it was pretty much the first death knell.
It's kind of like a cursed movie that apparently, like a little bit, because it kind of brought them.
Well, for a long
apart.
time, the band, you couldn't even bring up the movie in front of the band.
Wow, because it really hurt them. It really affected them.
Well, it completely destroyed them.
That's what I mean. Like it.
And it's a warning sign, too much, too soon, too fast. But there is no other movie like Kiss Meets the Phantom. And me personally, it was such a big deal for me. I had to see Kiss Meets the Phantom in the park.
How did you see it?
Well, it came out in 78, so I would have been about 4. And I think they reprised the broadcast in 79. And this is what I used to do when I was a kid, pre-VHS, is that I would get the TV guide every Saturday, and I would circle what horror movies I wanted to watch. I would cross-reference them with my Leonard Maltin video book, and then I would sneak an alarm clock under my pillow, and the alarm clock would ding, and I'd wake up at all hours and consume all these great horror films in the middle of the night, and it was always this interactive experience because I didn't want to wake my parents up, and so I'd turn the TV off and turn it back on. And one night, Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park was on, and it was like, that was it. It was at 1:30 in the morning on this American channel that we got in Toronto mysteriously, and that's when I first saw it, and it was a huge deal for me. It changed my life. To me, I did not recognize at the time that this was a bad picture. I just thought these were my heroes, these were my monsters.
And they were monsters
Well,
too.
they
also.
were, yeah. So that, Kiss Meets the Phantom, seeing that album in the library, opened up the floodgates to be more attuned to weird shit.
Is the production of this kind of a little bit similar to the Apple? I have to bring it because when we talk
what
about
year is
like,
the Apple? 80?
I think it's
Yeah.
1980 exactly.
Yeah,
on the
so
dot.
that period, as one decade bleeds into the next, as the 70s, the post-hippie era, I think, then we start to get a
And
little
like a
bit decadent,
musical.
coming out of the disco era, and the guard is changing a little bit. I think that's when we see this peak of just really overblown, decadent, rock and roll infused mistakes. I mean, I think we'd call Xanadu one of them as well. But absolutely, look,
yeah,
the
for
apple. If you like the
sure.
apple, and
I don't
yeah,
like
but
the apple.
But you feel. How do you feel about the apple? Because I know you're like you don't like it.
No, I don't like it, but I can respect people that do because I feel like the apple has a very.
But what else is like the apple?
That's another thing. It's the apple falls into that category of like, what is this movie and how do you compare it to other things?
Right.
But do I like it? No. Did I have fun watching it? Not really. But when I talk to a fan of the apple, it's kind of like how you're referring to this Kiss movie. It's like they love it. It's like when they see it, they don't see it as a bad movie. They accept all of its faults.
Well, even
and
if they see
plays
it
in history.
to call it. I mean, at this point, I mean, what is a bad movie?
Well, you've heard me say that. For me, a bad movie is one that I'm bored and I have nothing to say about.
Right, but even that's a
what
subjective thing.
And
right?
exactly, it's
Yeah.
subjective. There's no objectively bad. Maybe a movie that like is created to designed to cause intentional harm. If I could think of a movie that was like that,
Right. Well, that's
maybe that would be a
well,
bad
that's
movie.
nefarious intent, of course. But as far as these movies, like, there's nothing
Oh.
I hate worse. I hate Mystery Science Theater. I hate.
see,
all
I
that.
love it. It's
See,
funny.
I don't like that. I don't
I
need
grew up
somebody to
watching-
tell me how to like
Oh my God, but it's funny.
react to a movie.
But it's funny because like, okay, Mystery Science Theater, I used to watch that with my like an online friend in the middle of the night. We'd go on YouTube and sync or Netflix and sync them up like by saying, oh, 3, 2, 1, play on like Yahoo Messenger. And I love the movies that I found through that.
Okay.
Like Devilfish.
Right.
I watched Devilfish through Mystery Science Theater 3000. I love Devilfish.
Okay, but then now, did you love Devilfish, or did you love the fact that these silhouettes were ripping on Devilfish?
But you know what? How old was I? I was probably like 10 when I was watching that. So maybe I did need someone to kind of guide me
Okay,
to like how to see a movie.
So your perspective on the ride depends when you get on the train.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
never liked people telling me how to react.
I saw Riff Tracks live and I had so much fun
Well, I
watching
think
Reefer
Kiss Meets the
Madness.
Phantom actually has been riff tracks.
Oh, has it? Sometimes they do a bad job and sometimes they do a good job.
Well, I mean, listen, I'd be curious to even see that, but because I don't think it needs that. I think all you do, like the Apple, I think you just have to watch it and you can
And
just
you
experience
figure out where
it
you
yourself.
land.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about Kiss Meets the Phantom too. Now, through my journeys in what I do, I mean, when I took over Fangoria, the first thing I did, being Kiss informed my life, my entire life. Okay, so it stuck with me. I ended up appreciating the music and obsessing and fetishizing the band, and I did to my dying day. A big deal for me. But first thing I did when I took over Fangoria years ago is I reached out to Gene Simmons. And I said, man, I know you love monsters, and I know that's why you built that character in this band. I know Gene came from Haifa, Israel, and when he was a kid, he didn't speak English, and he learned the language from watching television and watching Lon Chaney and Twilight Zone episodes. And so he's, dyed-in-the-wool horror fan. I said, let's just do something together and just don't talk about the band. Let's just talk about monsters. He said, sure, come to my house. I'm like, oh, okay. Okay, Wizard of Oz, I'm on my way. And I
You're off
flew
to
out
see the
here.
wizard, yeah.
Right, from Toronto to L.A. Went to Gene's house. Went to Paul Stanley's house after that because they used to be neighbors. And Gene and I spent hours together just talking about monsters. So after that, we became friends. I ended up publishing the official Kiss magazine for 10 years. Wow. And so Kiss is a huge,
It's a huge
part of
part
my
of your
life.
life,
And I
yeah.
ended up, in a cool way, marrying it to my world with Fangoria and monsters and that kind of arcane aspect of my
that
obsession with
album,
culture.
seeing that album at 3 years old really just like was the trajectory of your life.
Yeah, like you have a broad love of all cinema. You're not just a horror girl, obviously.
No, I'm
You
not just a
love
horror girl.
everything.
No, but I'm definitely a genre girl. Like,
But do you remember that first thing that you saw at a key point in your life that just suddenly you could, picture you being in Wayne's World and your Garth and Dreamweaver starts playing? You know, that moment where you just go, oh,
Well, it's funny. I have a few of those because like when I was little, there's a few movies I cite that it's like I thought everyone though like watched these movies. Like I always say,
you have a different.
I thought everyone knew. I thought the Violent Femmes was like a new band when I was in like 5th grade. I thought everyone knew who the Violent Femmes were. I thought Gone Daddy Gone was like the biggest song of the century. I thought everyone knew. I was I thought about it. But when I was like 25 or 26, I saw Altered States for the first time. And I was like in a period of my life where
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
When you were 25 or 26.
I saw Altered States for like the
This
first
is
time.
recent
This is
history.
recent history.
Okay.
I saw it for the first time as a part of an ancient Gnosticism class. It was assigned to watch in relationship to a text on like vocalization of prayer or something like that.
Right.
And I watched it and I felt my head open. And I was in a point in my life where I wasn't really sure if I liked the movie industry anymore. I was working as a writer. I came off of a really bad job, like my first solo job, and I never wanted to work ever again as a writer. And I saw Altered States and I fell back in love with movies.
Okay, so what was it about Altered States? Was it the psychedelic aspect, the visual?
It was Ken Russell saying "Choose Love."
Yeah,
It was my very first Ken Russell movie, and I just fell in love with him actually Tommy was when I was a kid.
Right.
But I just like fell in love with it, and it was like so positive that he's like basically choose love in the end. Like if you love me, you'll live. And it was such a powerful message to me. And I don't know, I felt my head open up, and I was like, I actually found a director that I need to know everything about.
Okay.
And it put me on this journey, and then it really fed my love of just learning. And that's like, I don't know, it's weird because I have formative young things where like Yellow Submarine. I love the Beatles. I was in love with Ringo when I was a kid, and like learning that they didn't voice themselves killed me.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, they didn't voice themselves.
Okay,
It
all right.
killed me.
Oh,
I literally, as a child, I was like, how could they do this to me?
Right.
But no, I have like recent ones. I have far away, and I'm still growing. I think we're always growing though as cinephiles.
Absolutely. Yeah, but I mean, you can usually trace things back to one moment, or at least I can, and that's for me. It was
that Kiss thing.
It was both Kiss and going to the House of Frankenstein wax museum in Niagara Falls, Canada.
How old were you when you did that?
I was just like chasing right after Kiss. My granny took me to Niagara Falls.
Really?
And I was obsessed with looking at the House of Frankenstein. I was afraid to go in the house. It still exists, this place, by the way. It's fucking amazing.
You've gone in, right?
A million times. I go once a month. It's like it's
Wait,
my.
'cause you can just
They
drive.
actually built a roller coaster on it recently on the roof.
Really?
Oh, it's amazing. Have you ever been to Niagara Falls? Do you know what I'm talking about? There's like a little strip of wax museums, a little Clifton Hill.
Okay, so I've been to Niagara on the Canadian side.
Well, that's where you want to go. That's where the
but
fun
that's
stuff
where the
is.
good stuff is. But I've never done like all those things.
There's so many amazing spook houses there. I mean, but Frankenstein is the king, and it's been there since I think the 1950s.
Wow.
And so my grandmother took me in there. You walk through the door and all these crazy sound effects and clanging buzzers when you step. And I wanted to run out, but you weren't allowed to run out. You had to be pushed through it. So I had to keep walking through.
You
and I'm
had
like,
to push through being uncomfortable, though. You had to push through it.
Right. So I did, and I closed my eyes and opened my eyes. And my granny kept saying, I'm sorry. I'm like, And then I'll never forget, at the end, you get out of it, and it literally opened a door, and it spits me out into the gift shop. It exited into the gift shop.
Exit through the gift
And
shop.
The Carpenters, we've only just begun, was on the Muzak, and people were looking at snow globes and everything. Right, so here I just came out of the seventh circle of hell and opened a door, and next thing I know, I'm in this innocuous, benign universe. How could I couldn't quantify that these two worlds existed together. And so it was absolutely discovering the iconography of Kiss, and later the music, but that's another story. And then seeing the House of Frankenstein, and not too long after that, finally locking my mitts on Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, where horror and rock and roll and Frankenstein, because there's even a scene in Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park where the band is, they fight Frankenstein and Dracula, and all. They end up in the wax museum, and they're fighting all the werewolves,
way,
the wolfman.
really?
Oh yeah, so everything, just my whole Freudian id just blew open, and it was
It
all
was like
there.
almost like a movie that was designed by God for you.
For all of us little kid Kiss chuggies. And I say little kid because real hardcore Kiss fans were there at the beginning when the band was fucking dangerous. Hated this shit.
Well, of course they
this
did,
is
because
when they
here's them,
became a
like-
kids band, right? And I was the right guy. They called this the Super Kiss era, where Kiss was on steroids. Again, the comics, the lunchboxes, the dolls. I have the pinball machine in my living room, by the way. I bought it at some point back a few years back, and
You're the
there
one
it
that should have
sits.
it. You're the one that should have it.
Exactly. So, yeah, it was a big deal and still is a big deal for me. But, again, I can never recommend Kiss Meets the Phantom to the average film goer. It's not a movie that demands respect. It's almost like this bizarre, garish artifact sitting in a museum that you have to study as as evidence that this strange civilization once existed. Kind of like the Apple.
But it's also exactly what you said. How you feel about it depends on when you get on the ride. And it's like,
Exactly.
because you have people that were with Kiss from the beginning who hated it. You have you that got on at the exact perfect moment. You were the right age. And then you have me who maybe has no information or no connection to
Yeah.
it. And if I watch it, I might get it, I might not. If I'm able to talk to someone like you and see it through your eyes, I'll definitely appreciate it more.
Yeah.
But it's like you have to hit something at the right time. That's why I'm never like, when I recommend a movie to someone, I never tell them like, why didn't you watch it yet?
Right.
Because I know they'll watch it at the exact perfect time for them.
Yeah. Well, yes, I listen. I say I would never really recommend it. I recommend you do watch it because you're a different breed, Gala Avery, and I think you might get something out of it. You're an apple. You've endured the apple. If you lived through the apple.
And Xanadu.
Oh, and but Xanadu is actually kind of cool.
I don't know how I feel about Xanadu.
But it's got that cool ELO music.
Okay,
It's
but here's the thing. So it's funny. It's like I also think about like all these other rock operas that kind of came out
Yeah.
because we were doing like, I don't know, hair metal, like they call it hair metal or glam rock. Like, are they the same thing, hair metal and glam rock?
No. Well, I mean, yeah, glam rock it would inform hair metal, but
Yeah.
glam rock would have preceded hair metal.
At rowing, we were supposed to do some kind of like themed row where you had to do like,
I love how rowing is like this,
it's this thing, it's this force in my
you're
life.
in.
It's this
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
It's a
okay.
cult. It's a
Yeah,
cult.
well,
that
kind
I'm
of,
in.
but it's a cool cult.
No, it's 100%
It's a
cult.
healthy cult.
It's 100% a cult. But we had to do like a hair metal row, and they couldn't find songs at the right beat. And so I was like looking up like, okay, what music could I put in? And I found like apparently Phantom of the Paradise is considered a hair metal.
No, well, that would be
Alma.
that would be leaking out of glam a
Yeah.
little bit, but I wouldn't even call it that. Would you call? I mean, Paul Williams would maybe try to be doing glam a little bit, but it's still Paul Williams, you
It's
know?
100% still
Yeah.
like Piano and Paul Williams.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly, yeah.
maybe Life at Last by Beef. Maybe that's a glam.
Yeah,
That's
it's
not
well,
really,
it's trying to be like a Roxy Music
I think
kind
it's
of
close
yeah.
to that because like they go through all the eras in the movie.
Well, okay, so I know you love Phantom of the Paradise. Right?
I'm not a Rocky Horror fan though.
Well, I am to a point. I think there's a point in Rocky Horror where I just go, I'm out.
But I feel like people are usually
First half
either-
hour's dynamite.
I agree. I
Yeah.
feel like people that are usually touch me, touch me, touch me, touch
Yeah,
me.
it gets goof.
I wanna be
Yeah,
dirty.
yeah.
I actually kind of like that.
Oh,
part.
do you? I mean, I like the tune, but in the movie, I find it really runs out of gas. Whereas Phantom of the Paradise, although it's not really fair to compare, but Phantom of the Paradise does not because it's a
But
fully
they
realized
are,
film.
But it's funny because they are actually kind of companion films, and people either
They've
I
become
find
that,
they-
but-
I feel like I think Phantom of the Paradise is a response to Rocky Horror.
Well, to the stage
To the-
play because
yeah.
it precedes it as a film. right?
Yes,
Yeah.
I think so. But people usually are either one or the other. I've never really met someone that's both.
To me, they can both coexist because to me, I find them completely radically different. You know, yeah,
good.
Yeah. So if you like Phantom of the Paradise, you love Phantom of the
I
Paradise.
love.
Yeah, well, I love.
I have a
Phantom.
poster of that in
Okay,
my house.
So you love Phantom of the Paradise. You get Phantom of the Paradise.
Yes.
You've seen the. Okay, so imagine.
all the
okay,
lyrics
so
to Phantom of
imagine-
the Paradise.
Imagine Phantom of the Phantom of the Opera.
I
It's
also
interesting because Paul Stanley from Kiss, and this is a funny story. Years later, when I was in the 90s, so I was I was like 20 or something. I don't know, and 18, 19. Oh, who cares? Something like that.
At some
I
point
was
in the
young
90s, you were
enough
something.
to still be working a shitty job, and Paul Stanley was announced in Toronto. He was taking over the role of the Phantom in Andrew Lloyd Webber's Phantom of the Opera.
I kind of love Phantom.
And
of
I
the
was like,
Opera
oh my
too.
God, I got. So I applied for a job as an usher, and we're going for the interview, and they're like, now you don't just want this job because you're a Kiss fan, right? I'm like, I hate Kiss. I don't know shit about Kiss. I just need a job. They're like, you're hired. So every night I got to go and work at the Pantages Theater in Toronto and sit with Paul Stanley while he came out and did his vocal checks, and I'd call out Kiss songs, did he ever sing them? No, but it was just like I could see it every night. I was there, and every night was like a Phantom of the Paradise rock opera because Kiss fans were flying in full makeup to watch Phantom of the
That
Opera.
is so special. Because
It
the
is
funny
so
thing
special.
And I love Phantom of the Opera.
So do I. I love that musical.
When I was like a kid, I remember I saw the movie for the first time, and I was like, I want to become an opera singer.
Yeah, I actually always liked the movie. It gets a bum rap.
I saw that and Tommy at like the exact same time.
Okay, so imagine Phantom of the Paradise, Tommy. We don't need to see Phantom of the Opera because that Phantom of the Paradise covers
Has
that.
enough of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so Phantom of the Paradise, Tommy, and the Apple have this bizarre menage a trois and give birth to a really messy, alcohol, fetal, whatever creature that is Kiss meets the Phantom of the Park. That's what you got.
Wow.
Okay? This like bastard child of everything that was right and wrong about the 1970s and the excesses of rock and roll and pop culture is living and breathing in this movie. And what's interesting about this too is that I'm a super fan, obviously, and the rights for this thing are so dodgy.
I was going to say, how do you see
You
this?
can't, well, it's okay. So for many years, people thought it was in the public domain. But it can't be officially in the public domain because Kiss owns their likenesses and they own their music. Oh. So, but Kiss doesn't own
Are
the
they
movie.
trademarked characters?
Yeah, so they trademark the characters and the tunes. So it's not officially in the public domain because Kiss owns that aspect of it, but they don't own the movie. So in Europe, the movie was released theatrically in a completely different version called Kiss in the Attack of the Phantoms. And it's longer and it's more arty. And Anthony Zerbe does this lonely man walk in it, and there's different music cues in it. The Scooby-Doo music's gone. It's a radically different experience. So that version was released in theaters in Australia and parts of Europe and Italy. I think there are some kind of rights for that version of it, but the real version, nobody knows. I used to be a publicist when I was a kid at Warner Brothers Films. So
You've done it all.
I've done it all. I really,
You've done
truly
it
have.
all.
I really have done it all. And I was I still had contacts at Warner's, and I remember with Gene Simmons, I'm going, dude, I'm going to find the rights to this movie, and we're going to release it as a midnight movie, and it's going to be and I was with Warner Brothers because they had all the rights to Hanna-Barbera stuff, and they did all the checks and Nobody knew. They couldn't untangle they could not find
Wow.
the paper trail to see who owned this fucking movie. So to this day, Kiss, even with their big machine behind them and all their lawyers and everything, there's, Arrow Video's been trying to figure it out. I mean, so many different boutique labels have been trying to figure out who owns this. How can we do that?
Because as soon as someone figures it out, they're like the hero.
Right. So the only way you can see Kiss Meets the Phantom is occasionally it shows up on YouTube before somebody removes it.
Who's removing it though?
Well, I have no idea.
No, because
Some asshole.
that's the thing. Whoever's doing the copyright striking, because
Probably the music. It's the music.
it's
yeah,
the music.
So the music's
they're
on there. You
copyright
blank.
striking.
It gets.
That's just like automatic AI or whatever.
There's
now.
a rip-off bootleg company called Cheesy Flicks that put out a video on DVD years ago that you can find bumping around on eBay. But that in itself was a rip from a VHS release from Good Times Home Video.
Oh, that's a good time tape.
Yeah, it's a Good Time tape, and that's one of the holy. I have it, of course. It's one of the holy grails of Kiss culture. Is that Good Times?
I bet it's an expensive tape.
It's
even-
actually not as expensive as you
Really?
think. Yeah. So, but it is it's a movie that needs. I wouldn't say it needs a reappraisal as there's nothing in there that there's no auteurism in there. There's nothing completely, some hidden cinematic element. There's no subtext in the picture, but it is an important. To me, it's just as an important motion picture as well. You fill in the blank, whatever you consider a culturally important motion picture. I think it is
also important to you in shaping you and something you
Shaping me,
love.
but also
A
again,
whole generation of kids.
Again, I mean this. Kiss fan or not, doesn't matter. There is no other fucking movie like Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park. I swear to you, this is true.
God, I gotta track
Hand
this
to
down.
heart. Truth.
Okay, if the tape isn't so expensive, I'm gonna track down the tape.
Find it.
I will.
For
I'll
God's,
find it.
convince your cohorts. Do it on the show. Drag it out.
Maybe we'll have to. I should see if it's in video archives.
I bet you he's got it.
Well, it's a good time tape. Those are always.
It's a good time.
They
tape,
fly
and
away.
The cover's great. The
Is
cover's
it?
great.
What's the cover?
Well, it's funny because the cover's funny because usually with Kiss, the guys that hog the spotlight are always Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley. But on the cover of this, Gene he's there, but it's Peter Criss, the drummer, who never gets any high fives. He's featured very prominently on the cover, and it's a poor man's Ken Kelly painting on the cover. We're out of time.
We're out of time. Wow, you buttoned that really well. It's almost like you've done this before.
I have. It's not my first Gala Avery rodeo.
So that's all the time that we have for today. But Chris,
Yeah.
is there any final thought that you want to share with the audience?
No, just, watch Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, and if you love it, then you can love me. If you hate it, then you can hate me. That's okay. I'm not responsible for how you perceive and react to this picture. But again, it's an important movie. That's it. I got nothing else.
That's it for today. Thank you so much to my guest, Chris, for coming onto the show. You can keep up with the latest news from Chris on his website, chrisalexanderonline.com, or on his Instagram at Chris_Alexander_films.
Yes.
I'm Gala Avery, and this has been The Gala Show.
The Gala Show is brought to you by Avery.com. This episode was executive produced by Roger Avery and produced by Gala Avery. Music composed by Andy Milburn. As always, I'm your host, Gala Avery. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved. Despite me sharing the same last name with this charity, I don't have any affiliation with it, besides the fact that the issue is very near and dear to my heart. Did you know that in the United States, 2.7 million children currently have a parent in prison, and it's estimated that 10 million children have experienced parental incarceration at some point in their lives? I was one of these kids, and as an adult, I am really grateful to be able to give back to Project Avery. Their mission is to build leadership from within by supporting community through programs such as mentoring and outdoor education, and also to remove the stigma surrounding having a parent that's incarcerated. You don't have to feel alone. If you know a kid who could use these resources or would like to donate money or time to the charity, please go to Project Avery, that's AVARY.org, to check out what this amazing charity is all about. Again, that's projectavery.org. Thank you guys, from the bottom of my heart.
Hi, I'm Chris Gethard, and I'm very excited to tell you about Beautiful Anonymous, a podcast where I talk to random people on the phone. I tweet out a phone number, thousands of people try to call, you talk to one of them, they stay anonymous, I can't hang up, that's all the rules. I never know what's going to happen. We get serious ones. I've talked with meth dealers on their way to prison. I've talked to people who survived mass shootings. crazy funny ones. I talk to a guy with a goose laugh, somebody who dresses up as a pirate on the weekends. I never know what's going to happen. It's a great show. Subscribe today. Beautiful Anonymous.